The demi-humans scattered throughout this world have kept the village of Lag in a state of constant warfare. Kai, a soldier from the village, joins forces with his friend Manso to confront one of the gorilla monsters. However, not even the strength of their friendship can save him, because when it comes to fighting, Kai's skills are utterly worthless. Now, Kai finds himself cornered. Without a doubt, he would have met his end right then, but at the last possible moment, Alha strikes down the gorilla. As the village's appointed guardian, blessed by the land god, he stands as the strongest warrior among them. With terrifying ease, he slices through the gorilla one after another, until finally, he stands before the gorilla guardian. You'd expect this, the mightiest of gorillas, to pose some real difficulty for Alha, yet in mere seconds, he cleaves it clean in half. Now that all the gorillas are taken care of, the soldiers begin slicing into their bodies, and one of them passes Alha, a container filled with a strange liquid. Without hesitation, Alha takes it and drinks the liquid, and right after, his body starts glowing with a red aura. These are known as godstones. Consuming the liquid within is said to boost a person's strength and spiritual energy. So it would seem logical for everyone in the army to drink at least one to grow stronger together. But that's not the case. The rules only permit them to consume tiny drops of it. Each of them gets their drop, and after taking his, Kai can already sense his spiritual power rising. He turns to Manso and asks if he can have a bit more, but sadly, he's just a regular foot soldier, so there's no chance he'll ever be allowed to drink an entire godstone. According to the rules, nearly all the godstones must go to a guardian bearer like Alha, so even though he's already incredibly powerful, he's forced to grow even stronger, while the other soldiers remain stuck at pitifully low power levels. And yet, nobody sees a problem with this system. Back in the village, a grand celebration erupts to commemorate their triumph over the gorillas. Yet even during the feast, portions are strictly divided by rank. The mighty warriors and the chief's children take all meat and wine for themselves, while lowly foot soldiers like Kai are left scraping by with nothing but a meager bowl of soup. The soup honestly isn't all that bad, but Kai can't help wishing he could have some of the good food as well. Unfortunately, that's never going to happen as long as he's stuck as a low-ranking soldier, so he makes a vow to train hard and grow stronger so he can climb up the ranks. Right after the banquet ends, Kai heads outside and begins training with everything he's got. But it's tough to give it his all when he's barely had anything to eat all day. He shouts out that he really wishes he had some rice balls right now, and just a few moments later, Manso appears and asks Kai what exactly rice balls are. Kai admits he isn't entirely certain where the idea came from. The word simply popped into his head one day out of nowhere. Still, he can't shake the feeling that rice balls would be incredibly delicious. There's something weighing on Kai's mind, and he points toward the hill where the village honors its deceased warriors. That particular slope is reserved for soldiers who left behind families, a place constantly visited by grieving loved ones. But in the other side, there's another hill in complete disarray, crowded with the neglected graves of those who died without anyone to mourn them. No one has ever bothered to care for this forgotten patch of land. Orphans like him are destined to end up buried in a place like that when they die, with no one to visit their graves and no trace that they ever existed in the village. That's exactly why Kai wants to become stronger, to survive long enough to live a life that actually means something. And for that, he has no other option but to eat his meager rations and push himself harder in training than anyone else. But even that wouldn't be enough to guarantee he makes it. He'd need some unique advantage, some hidden power to give him an advantage in battle, though he has no idea what that could be. At that very moment in the castle, Alha and his sister Jose are making their way to their father's room. Alha tells Jose there's no need for her to worry about war briefings since she isn't expected to take part in combat like he is. Still, she says she wants to help protect the village too. But Alha brushes her off, saying that a daughter from the chief's family doesn't need to learn how to fight, and no matter how much she pleads, he won't allow it. Jose fumes at the injustice, being barred from battle simply because she's a girl. The universe seems to mock her further when she glances out the window and spots Kai and Manso laughing and sparring together. Manso, older and far more skilled, effortlessly outmatches Kai in their training sessions, leaving Kai with no choice but to desperately focus on defense the entire time. Manso warns Kai that he'll never improve if he doesn't start taking the offensive. Kai finally attempts an attack, but in doing so, leaves himself completely exposed. Manso counters instantly, sending Kai crashing crashing to the ground where his head hits the floor. The impact leaves him with a severe concussion, and suddenly, fragmented memories from his past life in Japan come rushing back. As his consciousness flickers through these memories, he remembers one specific word: magic. However, when he finally wakes up, he has no clue what magic even means, since that word doesn't exist in this world. This isn't the first time Kai has experienced strange memories either, and apparently, in this world, there are quite a few people who see visions like that, but Kai doesn't think it's worth mentioning to anyone. Sure, the memories gave him knowledge about things like rice balls and magic, but none of that really helps him here, especially since magic was just a fairy tale back in Japan anyway. Still, if there were somehow a way for him to actually use magic, he could make a big impression in their next battle, and that would definitely boost his status. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the chief has just gotten a letter from one of the neighboring villages, and it seems they're under attack by orcs. So, in line with the alliance agreement between the two villages, the people of Banya are obligated to head out and provide assistance right away. The chief isn't happy about having to send the soldiers back into battle so soon, especially since they've barely had any time to rest and recover from the fight against the guerrillas. But Olha tells him that it's a soldier's duty to be moved around and to die for the village, so they have no right to complain. Even so, the chief reminds him that the soldiers are still part of the village too, and he shouldn't treat them like they're just disposable pawns. Back in the barracks, Kai is having trouble sleeping because he can't get the idea of magic out of his head. Manso can tell that something is bothering him, so he asks what's wrong. Kai tells him it's not a big deal, but he had a dream about being able to create fire out of nothing. As odd as it might seem, he thought Manso would think this sounds stupid, but to his surprise, Manso admits he's actually heard something like that before. He once heard a tale about a strange traveler who arrived in the village. The man wanted to start a fire, but didn't have any kindling with him, and under normal circumstances, it would have been impossible to do it without the proper tools. Yet, the man just lifted his finger and produced a flame out of thin air. Kai is surprised to hear that there's actually a record of someone using magic, but Manso reminds him that he only heard it from an old story, so there's no guarantee that it is true. Even so, hearing that story has motivated Kai to try learning to use magic. So the next day he heads out and finds a secluded spot so he can start training. He isn't entirely sure how magic functions, but from what he remembers, it seems to require some kind of enigmatic energy. The closest thing Kai can compare it to would be spiritual energy, so he decides to give that a try. Extending his finger, he orders his spiritual energy to manifest as fire, yet it's not quite so simple. It dawns on him that he likely needs to concentrate his spiritual energy first, so he starts attempting to channel it through his godstone. But no matter how hard he focuses, nothing changes. Meanwhile, orcs have been sighted just outside the neighboring village, and they've already killed a dozen soldiers, so the rest of the soldiers assemble to fight back. The soldiers wait outside the forest to see if the orcs are still there, and as soon as they spot the orcs, they charge in. The orcs start their attack too, but Manso quickly manages to stab one right through the heart. Wanting to get a kill of his own, Kai rushes forward, but one of the orcs hurls a corpse at him, slamming Kai against a tree and pinning him down. The orc then approaches, ready to strike Kai down, but before it can, a volley of arrows hits it, and Manso finishes it off. Manso shouts at Kai for charging ahead alone and orders him to return to the formation, but it seems Kai injured his leg when he got hit and now can't walk on his own. At the same time, Olha is tearing through the orcs, and once they realize he's far too powerful for them to handle, they all begin to retreat. But Olha has no intention of letting them escape, so he abandons the rest of the soldiers and takes off after the fleeing orcs. That pretty much leaves them to deal with the remaining orcs on their own, and considering how hard it is for them to fight the orcs on their own, the soldiers are cooked. The squad leader orders all the soldiers to run and scatter so most of them can survive. But with Kai's injured leg, he and Manso have no chance of escaping the orc. Kai refuses to hold his friends back because of him, so he stops Manso and urges him to keep going alone. Manso is unwilling to abandon Kai, but deep down, he understands there's no other option. With regret, he apologizes and swears he'll pay his respects at Kai's grave. Then, Manso run away in one direction while Kai crawls away in the opposite direction. He knows there's no way he can win, but he still refuses to give up on his life. So when he hears the orc getting closer, he tries to cast fire magic to protect protect himself, but it still doesn't work. Moments later, the orc hurls its blade at Kai, hitting him in the shoulder and leaving him badly wounded. On the upside, the brush with death causes sparks to shoot from Kai's fingertips, so maybe he actually can use magic. The problem is, he might not survive long enough to find out, because the orc bursts out of the bushes and starts choking him. Right then, Kai catches sight of the sparks from his fingertip, and he instantly understands what it means. He raises his hand toward the orc's face, and, using every ounce of strength and willpower he has left, he calls forth flames that burn the creature alive. The orc lets out a scream of agony, and Kai is able to free himself from its grasp. As a result, the orc eventually goes down from the damage it took, and Kai feels proud for finally managing to take down a monster by himself. But there's one small issue. His hand is still burning. He frantically tries to extinguish the flames, but after a few moments, he starts to lose consciousness because the fire is draining all of his spiritual energy. If he doesn't find a way to stop it soon, he's going to die from spiritual energy exhaustion. So he has to come up with something quickly. He just needs to picture his spiritual energy like a dam that he opened when he cast the fire magic. So to put out the flames, all he has to do is stay calm and shut the dam. Staying composed becomes nearly impossible as Kai sees the orc, badly wounded, but still alive. It starts approaching him. With great effort, he finally cuts off his spiritual energy's flow, but it's too late. The creature reaches him anyway. The orc takes him and starts walking away. Yet, the orc hasn't finished him off, and Kai realizes the flames must have blinded the creature and doesn't know he's still alive. Though Kai has no desire to die, he knows his body won't last much longer. At the very least, he's determined to drag the orc down with him. As the beast stumbles near the edge of a cliff, Kai slices deep into its chest, and both of them ended up falling into a river. Somehow, Kai survives the fall and uses his knife to pull himself out of the water, though his spiritual energy is still critically low. Realizing he has to move fast if he wants to stay alive, he notices the orc's corpse lying nearby, this time clearly lifeless. Without wasting a moment, he takes his knife, slices into the orc's body, and retrieves its godstone. Since drinking the godstone's liquid can help restore his spiritual energy, Kai wastes no time and ingests it completely. As the spiritual energy starts coursing through his body, Kai can already feel himself recovering, so he lies down beside a tree to get some rest. Now that he finally has a moment to reflect, it hits him. This is actually the first time he's ever consumed an entire godstone. From now on, spiritual energy won't be a problem. Still, the deep wound on his shoulder is bleeding heavily, and he's pretty sure he's going to die out here anyway. On a positive note, at least he can pass away watching such a beautiful sunset. Back in the village, all the soldiers have made it back from battle and are preparing to celebrate their triumph over the orcs. However, Manso isn't feeling the same joy. One of his fellow soldiers notices him looking down and approaches, telling him he should just cheer up. Then, it strikes him. Kai isn't there, which is strange since Manso and Kai are almost never apart. After a brief pause, it dawns on him Kai must have fallen in battle. But rather than offering sympathy, the soldier coldly tells Manso to move on, claiming Kai was nothing but dead weight anyway. Kai lies unconscious beneath the tree all night, and when morning comes, he wakes up shocked to find himself still alive. Not just alive, but feeling stronger than he ever has. His shattered leg has healed, and the wound on his shoulder has closed completely. While he's relieved at how things worked out, there's also a lingering confusion. After all, drinking a godstone shouldn't have been enough to fix such serious injuries in just one night. Kai figures it might have something to do with the wall behind him, so he turns to check and sees that it's actually a stone covered in strange inscriptions. He tries to read them, but there's too much vines blocking the view, so he decides to use his fire magic to burn it away. The problem is, his magic is way more powerful than it used to be, and the sudden burst sends Kai flying across the valley. As he gets back on his feet, he catches a glimpse of his reflection in the water and is stunned to see a divine crest now etched onto his face. He recognizes it instantly only as the mark of a guardian bearer. But within moments, the markings vanish, leading him to believe he must have imagined it. He heads back over to the stone, hoping to finally get a clear look at the inscriptions, but the writing is in a language he can't decipher, so he decides to give up and start making his way back to the village. He spots a cliff face that seems scalable, so he begins grasping the rocks to make his escape, but suddenly, his divine crest reappears and he unintentionally shatters the rock he was clinging to. He tumbles back into the valley, initially assuming the rock was frail. Yet, when he seizes another rock, he finds he can effortlessly crush this one too. He figures the Godstone must have given him a massive power boost, and Kai couldn't be happier about it. But just as he's celebrating, a voice calls out, telling him to leave, and he's not about to stick around to see who or what it was. He immediately starts climbing the cliff at full speed. When he reaches the top, he's stunned by how effortlessly he made it up. And now he's even more thrilled about his newfound strength than he was a moment ago. Still, he questions whether this is truly the power of divine protection. The divine crest, known as the mark of a guardian bearer, is said to be a gift from the land gods. Yet Kai has no memory of receiving any power from a god. Maybe it happened while he was unconscious, but until he learns the full story, it's probably best to keep this hidden from the other villagers for the time being. In the village, Manso has just completed preparing a grave for Kai. But at that moment, Kai shows up as if nothing happened. Manso is overjoyed to see Kai again, and life largely returns to normal afterward, with Kai resuming his regular tasks. This time, however, he excels remarkably at his work. He was only supposed to plow a small portion of the field, but in no time, he had plowed the whole area without even breaking a sweat. For a moment, Kai panics, fearing his divine crest might be visible, but after checking his reflection in the water, he confirms his secret remains secure. The crest likely only manifests when he exerts maximum effort, so as long as he avoids overworking, he should be fine. The others notice he seems much stronger than before and ask if something happened. Kai struggles to come up with an excuse, so he simply confesses that he consumed the Godstone from the orc he defeated. Hearing this, the group is stunned. Ordinary soldiers like them rarely get the chance to drink an entire Godstone. However, since Kai was badly wounded and near death, he really had no other option. Actually, during his journey back to the village, he ended up consuming the Godstones of nearly 10 orcs he encountered on the battlefield. This explanation makes perfect sense, so the others finally grasp why Kai has become so powerful. Manso even praises him, congratulating him on managing to return alive. Meanwhile, one of the village women, Elsa, keeps watching Kai for an unusually long time, prompting her friends to start teasing her about it. Around the same time, back in the village, Princess Jose heads to the storage house to speak with the person in charge. He informs her that all the grave offerings have been fully prepared, so she's free to begin the grave cleaning whenever she's ready. Early the next morning, Kai is already out training with his fire magic, and there's no doubt it's become more powerful than before. But as he's in the middle of practicing, Jose approaches and demands an explanation, saying he looks awfully suspicious. Kai has no choice but to obey the princess's direct order, so he explains everything about his fire ability to her. Surprisingly, Jose doesn't appear too shocked, as she's already familiar with similar powers. Typically, those with abilities come from elite families or are trained monks, making Kai somewhat unusual, especially since he shows no signs of exhaustion, despite having likely expended a great deal of spiritual energy. Jose remembers a rumor that Kai gained immense strength after consuming several Godstones, suggesting he possesses a greater reserve of spiritual energy than most. Jose requests that Kai train with her, and he has no grounds to decline. A short while later, the two are sparring with training spears, though Kai is far stronger than he used to be. Jose, as a guardian bearer, isn't someone he can easily overwhelm without exerting some effort. However, he doesn't want to unintentionally expose his divine crest if he pushes too hard, so he must be careful. After the duel ends, Kai makes his way to the well to fetch some water, genuinely surprised that he was able to complete the training so effortlessly, especially since he had been holding back to avoid exposing his divine crest. This implies that his true power is so overwhelming that even a guardian bearer like Jose wouldn't stand a chance if he were to unleash his full strength. Right at that moment, Jose asks him to bring her some water too, so Kai quickly hurries back to her. As she's washing her face, he takes the chance to ask whether all guardian bearers possess the same level of strength. strength. Jose explains that she's actually among the weaker ones, since both her father and brother are far stronger than she is. A guardian bearer's strength depends on the blessing they receive from their land god, but they also need to train independently if they want to grow stronger. When it comes to training, Jose falls far behind. Strictly speaking, she isn't obligated to train since women in this village aren't expected to fight, but as a guardian bearer, she has a responsibility to defend the village in battle, meaning she must grow stronger too. And the role of being a guardian bearer isn't just about victory in the battlefield. It goes beyond that. Kai is puzzled, but just as he's about to ask her to clarify, the morning bell rings for wake up. Since Jose isn't actually allowed to be out here, she needs to hurry back to the castle before anyone spots her. As she prepares to leave, Kai quickly stops her with one last question. What exactly did she mean when she said guardian bearers have a purpose beyond just winning battles? She has developed an affection for Kai and wishes to clarify things for him, but the rules forbid it. Instead, she invites him to join her on her monthly grave cleaning duty. Her land god is enshrined in Eda village, so she'll arrange for Kai to accompany her, and once they're there, she'll be able to reveal everything. Kai agrees to join, and a few days later, Jose sets out for the village along with Kai and a handful of soldiers. They've been tasked with protecting Jose in case anything goes wrong, since the area falls within ape territory. However, the soldiers find it a bit strange that they were suddenly picked to escort Jose, especially when it's usually another squad that handles this kind of mission. A soldier from Kai's squad mentions hearing a rumor that Jose specifically asked for Kai to join her, which is why their whole unit got pulled into this assignment. He turns to Kai and asks if it's true. Kai starts to answer, but before he can finish, Manso cuts him off, telling the others to back off because there's absolutely no way the princess would even recognize him. The others find it difficult to accept that Kai is friends with the princess, yet they remain envious of him nonetheless. Eventually, they reach the village, and to Kai's astonishment, it's nothing more than a heap of ruins. Years ago, monsters overran the village, forcing the villagers to abandon it. Yet the gravestone remains standing, and as followers of the land god, they're still bound by duty to tend to it. Even though this village's land god has grown so weak that nothing grows in the soil anymore. At that moment, Jose walks over and says she wants to explore the village a bit, so she'll need someone to escort her. The man instantly volunteers to escort Jose, but she says she'd prefer for Kai to go with her instead. So Kai and Jose begin walking through the village, and when they arrive at a small flower garden, Jose drops to her knees and begins to pray. Kai is curious and wants to ask what she's doing, but she insists on complete silence and tells him not to speak. Red aura suddenly begins to pour out of Jose's body onto the flowers, and when she is done, she explains that she was simply praying for the land god's grace to gather here. This is a job that only guardian bearers bound to a land god can do, but since this village was abandoned, her land god's spirit has grown very weak, which is part of the reason why she isn't as strong as her brother or her father. While Lag village thrives in producing abundant crops due to her father's strength, Jose struggles to sustain even this small flower garden with her abilities. Because of this, Jose's father has never slackened in his training, knowing that if he allowed himself to weaken, it could spell the end for Lag village entirely. While land gods do grant power to the guardian bearers, that power is dependent on how strong the individual is, which is why all the guardian bearers have to train and drink a ton of godstones. Kai and Jose eventually rejoin the rest of the group, and it's time to clean the gravestone, so they all venture into the ruins while a few soldiers remain behind to keep watch. As Kai and Jose work on cleaning the gravestone, he examines it closely and recognizes it as identical to the stone he encountered in the valley. And when he touches the inscription on this one, all the words are automatically translated in his head. The inscription mentions the name of the land god that this gravestone belongs to, so Kai goes around to the other side to read more. But for some reason, he can't read this part of the text. He's able to recognize certain words like pact and temple, but they don't come together as a full sentence, so he can't figure out what it's supposed to mean. Jose sees Kai mumbling to himself and asks if something's wrong. Kai's just about to respond, but then he gets distracted by Jose's chest and quickly looks away, choosing to stay silent. Just then, soldiers burst in and alert everyone that a group of apes is approaching. Everyone hurries outside and starts concealing the grave. However, before they can escape, the apes arrive. The captain quickly commands Kai and Manso to take Jose safely to the village, while the others stay behind to hold them off. As Kai and the others attempt to escape, two apes block their path, prompting Manso to step forward to confront them. However, one ape stomps through the flower garden that Jose has tirelessly nurtured. Enraged, Jose charges out, vowing to slay the beast for its destruction. At first, the ape hesitates when it sees the marks, but since she has barely any actual fighting experience, her hands tremble in fear. The ape quickly figures out she's a rookie and goes in for the kill, only for Kai to leap in and slash a deep cut across its chest. Kai notices the second ape charging at Manso's group, so he picks up the axe lying on the ground and swings it, slicing the ape in the shoulder. He then leaps into the air and drives the blade straight into its head. Everyone is surprised that Kai managed to defeat the apes with such ease, but Jose is particularly shaken because she caught a glimpse of the guardian bearer marks on Kai's face. After making it back to the village of Lag, Jose gets scolded by Olha, who's furious after he heard about her nearly getting herself killed in battle. He shouts that this is precisely the reason he disapproves of her fighting alongside the soldiers. However, the village chief steps in to calm him down. What matters most is that Jose is unharmed, but for the time being, they should concentrate on boosting patrols around the area, especially with the inspector's arrival approaching soon. Olha agrees and goes off to notify the soldiers about the updated patrol schedule. Once he's gone, Jose turns to her father and apologizes for all the trouble he's caused. But Moloch isn't upset. He's already been filled in on everything that happened, including how Kai took down two monkeys all by himself. So now he's just eager to see what Kai will do next. Meanwhile, Kai is busy taking care of a few chores when some of his friends grab him. They're giving him a hard time because ever since the expedition to Ida village, people have been calling Kai a hero for rescuing Jose. On top of that, there are even rumors going around that Kai and Jose grew really close during their time out there. Some of the girls notice what's happening and assume the boys are just fooling around like usual, but Elsa can't seem to look away from Kai. The others pick up on this and figure she must actually have feelings for him. They start teasing her, joking that if she doesn't make a move soon, someone else might swoop in and take Kai for herself. A few minutes later, Jose walks up to Kai and asks if they can speak alone. Even though he has no clue what she wants, Kai agrees, and the two of them head into a nearby alley to talk. To start, Jose makes sure to properly thank Kai for rescuing her life during the incident, but she also brings up something else. She could have sworn she spotted a divine crest on Kai's face when he was battling those monkeys. Now, after studying him up close, she's sure it must have been her imagination. After all, what are the odds that Kai just happened to become a guardian bearer out of nowhere? Her defeat in battle made her realize how weak she truly is. That's why she's decided to dedicate herself fully to training in order to become stronger, and she expects Kai to start joining her every morning from now on. Kai isn't thrilled about being dragged into Jose's training routine, but he can't bring himself to turn her down, so he reluctantly agrees to train with her each morning. Meanwhile, Kai's friends have been secretly spying on him from behind a tree this entire time. They have no clue what he and Jose are discussing, but they're all incredibly jealous that Kai gets to spend time with her. Later on, Kai goes about his usual routine and begins splitting firewood when Elsa unexpectedly approaches, carrying a bowl of water. Kai glances up and asks if she brought it for him. Elsa nods, explaining she figured he might need a drink after working so hard under the sun. Kai thanks her for looking out for him. At that moment, one of Elsa's friends approaches and urges her to hurry, as they still have tasks to complete. Kai assumes she was simply being kind, but Manso sees through Elsa's intentions and remarks to Kai that he's a fortunate guy. Right then, Kai catches the sound of an unusual bird call in the distance, and it reminds him of the one from the valley, though he can't figure out why it's happening here. That same night, Kai attempts to fall asleep, but the persistent bird cry keeps reaching his ears. Eventually, he gives up, climbs out of bed, and makes up his mind to track it down. A massive wall surrounds the village, village, but with Kai's current strength, he effortlessly leaps over it in a single bound. He then sprints all the way back to the valley where everything began. When he arrives at the tree, he notices the stone once again. Now that he understands it's the gravestone of a god, he attempts to read it, but for some reason, he still can't. Even so, he expresses his gratitude to the god for saving him and spends the rest of the night carefully cleaning the stone. Before he leaves, he places a small offering in front of it, but on the way back, he starts to feel a bit hungry, so he drinks from the river and grabs some fruit from a nearby tree. He's surprised by how much food the forest provides, which makes him wish he could actually live out here, and then he had an idea. He could just build a house for himself right in this place. However, building a house means he'll need wood, so he scales a nearby cliff until he spots a tall, sturdy tree perfect for cutting down. But now that he's standing right in front of it, he realizes he has no idea how to actually chop it down. He does have his dagger, but that's far too small to handle a tree this thick. Thinking quickly, Kai decides to use his fire magic, increasing its intensity until it shapes into a blazing blade around his hand. Unfortunately, since the tree is made of wood, his fiery slash accidentally ignites the surrounding forest. Thankfully, he manages to extinguish the flames before they spread too far, but he still needs to figure out how to fell this tree. If he could summon fire from nothing, surely he could come up with a way to chop through wood. Just then, a memory from his past life surges through his mind, and suddenly, Kai recalls everything about molecular structures. He realizes that to cut down the tree, all he needs to do is disrupt the bonds between its molecules. Pressing his palm against the tree, he focuses, channeling his spiritual energy in a new way, shaping it into a force that could slice straight through the tree's very trunk. Yet, before he can perfect the technique, he hears a sound nearby, coming from the valley's direction. Curious, he chooses to investigate. Taking a closer look at the tree, we notice that Kai indeed succeeded in cutting part of the tree's molecules. Upon reaching the valley, Kai spots what appears to be a group of kids using some kind of climbing gear, preparing to descend into the valley. Uncertain of their motives, but knowing it's his responsibility to guard the valley, Kai leaps into action, fully ready to knock some sense into a few of them. To his shock, as he gets a better look, he realizes these aren't children at all. They're short people. Their leader moves forward and introduces himself as Porek, who is the chief of the Kora people. Kai has no knowledge of the Koras before this moment, and he finds it odd that their leader speaks the human language with such fluency. Porek goes on to explain that he and his people often trade goods with human merchants, and it seems humans hold their goods in high standard. Porek wishes to apologize for arriving here without asking for permission first. He clarifies that they've come to honor an ancient pact made with the great valley god who dwells in this place. Based on what they understand, the valley god takes the form of a human. Because of this, they are convinced that Kai must be the valley god. Porek goes on to explain that the Koras have quietly lived in these woods for generations while worshipping the land gods, but a few days ago, the pigs attacked them in an attempt to take their land god. The Koras are really weak, so they stood no chance of winning and were forced to flee their home. Porek speaks to Kai, calling him an ancient arbitration god, and pleads for his assistance in taking back their homeland. Kai struggles to make sense of everything, but before anything else, he needs to understand what an arbitration god even is. Porek elaborates that, according to the legends, an arbitration god is a being granted the power of all creation to safeguard the forest's creatures. Yet Kai remains skeptical, finding it difficult to accept that the legend could possibly be referring to him. Just then, one of the dwarfs speaks up and says he doesn't believe Kai is an arbitration god because the legends say an arbitration god should be a fierce warrior who punishes those who disturb the peace of their land, and Kai doesn't look fierce in the slightest. However, Porek says he is absolutely certain that Kai is the arbitration god because he can see it clear as day. Years ago, Porek once incurred the wrath of the valley god by entering this valley without permission, and as punishment, the valley god took both of his eyes. However, in return, Porek was granted the power to perceive the spiritual energy surrounding him, and when he observes Kai, he can clearly see the essence of the valley god coursing within him. He insists is undeniable proof that Kai has been blessed by the valley god's protection. Not only that, they've already presented a sacrifice, so now Kai has no choice but to help them. Kai gets confused by the mention of a sacrifice, so Porek explains that earlier today he sacrificed his granddaughter Aru to the valley. Kai panics and asks them to show him where they left Arua. So they lead him to the rope that Arua used to descend into the valley. But that rope snapped a while ago, so she probably fell to her doom. Kai leaps down into the valley and discovers Arua's body lying at the bottom. Miraculously, she's still alive, but the severe blood loss means time is running out. Remembering how his own wounds mysteriously healed when he first arrived here, Kai attempts to replicate the process using magic. He focuses on picturing her injuries healing themselves. As he concentrates, he can somehow perceive the very fabric of Arua's tissues, allowing him to target each damaged cell. Channeling his magic, he works to restore her wounded flesh. With this newfound understanding, Kai successfully closes Arua's wounds. Kai is genuinely surprised that actually worked. However, it seems Arua will need some time to recover before she can stand again. Meanwhile, Kai notices a disturbance at the valley's edge and realizes the orcs have launched an attack. The Korers are nearly helpless against the enormous orcs, leaving them with little they can do. But suddenly, Kai appears, saving them by driving his blade through one of the orcs' chests. While he was away, several Korers had already been slain, and the one responsible is the orc leader. The orc leader shows its divine crest, trying to frighten Kai, yet its cleaver remains drenched in the blood of the slaughter Korers. Because of this, Kai refuses to back down, not until he has his vengeance, and he isn't the only one filled with rage, as he hears a voice begins in his head, urging him to slaughter the orc and fill its heart with terror before its end. Kai understands the voice belongs to the Valley God, and as the guardian bearer of the Valley God, he stands ready to fulfill its command. However, before Kai can start the fight, Porek steps up and offers to join him. He might not be as strong as Kai, but as a guardian bearer himself, he's more than capable in battle. Kai is grateful for the backup. It'll make things much simpler. And to make sure the orcs understand exactly what they're facing, Kai turns toward them and activates his own divine crest. The smug looks on the orcs' faces vanish as the orcs realize that they're now up against two guardian bearers. Still, their leader orders them to attack anyways. The orcs rush forward, and Kai swiftly cuts down both of them. One tries to ambush Kai while he's distracted, but Porek dashes in and strikes it down to shield him. Kai nods in gratitude, though Porek admits he can only handle the weaker foes. With that, he tells Kai he'll have to face the orc guardian bearer alone. Kai grabs a cleaver and begins approaching the last orc. The orc, sensing its doom, attempts to plead for mercy. This one can speak the human tongue and tells Kai there's no need for conflict, as the orc only meant to target the Korers. It claims it had no intention of offending Kai. Under ordinary circumstances, Kai wouldn't be this furious. But the orcs didn't just slaughter numerous Korers, they committed this atrocity within Kai's own valley. Seeing the blue divine energy radiating from Kai's body, the orc begins pleading for his life. Yet Kai feels no pity for him. The orc launches a desperate attack in an attempt to survive, but Kai slices off its arm with his energy blade and drives the weapon through the orc's chest to extract its godstone. Watching this unfold, Porek becomes more convinced than ever that Kai truly is the arbitration god, the very same deity who once took his eyes, a god who has safeguarded the world since before the era of gods. For the first time, Kai has taken the life of a guardian bearer, and Porek reveals that consuming a guardian bearer's godstone allows one to acquire the abilities of the fallen guardian. Unlike an ordinary godstone, this one is far more powerful, meaning it should grant Kai a significant increase in strength. Kai splits the godstone into two pieces, yet before drinking his share, he offers part of it to Porek. Porek questions whether Kai is certain about giving him a portion, but Kai insists that Porek deserves it after aiding him in the battle against the orcs. After a moment, Porek accepts the gift and expresses his gratitude for Kai's kindness. After drinking the godstone, Porek immediately drops to his knees, caught off guard by the intense potency of the guardian bearer's power, far stronger than he expected. At first, Kai appears unaffected, but moments later, he collapses to the ground in pain. The Korers quickly gather around him, concerned, asking if he's okay. Kai reassures them, saying he just needs some time to recover, and then he makes his way back down to the valley, warning them to keep their distance for now. While Kai is resting, a nightmare from his childhood haunts his sleep. In this world, his first village was set ablaze by a band of guerrillas, leaving him no choice but to escape and find shelter in Lag Village. When morning comes, Kai wakes up and is surprised to see that he's been covered with a blanket. But what shocks him even more is discovering Aru lying next to him. He panics and demands to know what Aru is doing. So she tells him that she only wanted to keep him from catching a cold, which is why she stayed close to keep him warm. Although Kai saved her, she reminds him that she was still sent here as an offering, and because of that, she vows to dedicate her life to serving him as best as she can. Kai responds that he doesn't need a servant and urges her to go back home, but Aru insists she cannot. According to what his grandfather told her, if she fails to fulfill her duty as an offering, a terrible misfortune will fall upon all of them, so she can't leave. Kai continues trying to persuade her to return home, but then he notices the sun has risen, meaning he needs to hurry back to Lag Village before anyone discovers he was gone. He quickly scales the side of the valley, only to be surprised when he finds the rest of the Korers still waiting for him. He expected them to have left by now, but as Porek explains, while they're grateful Kai saved them from the orcs, they have nowhere else to go. With their old village destroyed, they were hoping Kai would allow them to stay here and dedicate themselves to serving him. Kai can't help but feel some sympathy for their situation, so he reluctantly agrees to let them settle on the land around the valley. But he makes one thing very clear: they're absolutely forbidden from entering the valley itself without his direct permission. Just as he's preparing to return to the village, Porek stops him, saying there's something crucial he needs to share before Kai leaves them. Not long after, Kai makes it back to the village, only to immediately face an irritated Jose. He's late for their usual morning training, and she isn't happy about it. When she demands to know where he's been, Kai can't exactly admit that he was in the valley, so he settles for the simple excuse of having overslept. A short time later, the chief comes up to a few of Kai's friends and asks if they have any idea where he might be. Monzo replies that Kai was given storage house duty today, so he should be somewhere near the castle. When Vezin finally tracks him down, he immediately challenges Kai to a duel. After hearing about Kai's impressive performance while defending Jose, Vezin is eager to witness Kai's strength firsthand, but he assures Kai that it's just a friendly sparring match, so there's no need to worry about anyone getting killed. Kai feels relieved knowing that this isn't a fight to the death, but after what Porek told him, he realizes he'll need to stay cautious. Porek advised him to keep the fact that he's a guardian bearer a secret for the time being. Since he only recently gained this power, he's vulnerable and could be easily targeted before he learns to control it fully. That's why Kai must make sure to keep his divine crest concealed no matter what. So Kai knows he has to restrain himself during the fight with Vezin. Even though Vezin is the weaker one, he's the first to attack, prompting Kai to leap aside and evade each incoming blow. However, as the battle heats up, Kai starts getting too fired up, causing his divine crest to appear. He quickly pulls himself together and manages to suppress it, making the crest disappear. But with the duel still underway, Kai pushes forward and lands a strike on Vezin with his spear. Unfortunately, Vezin's durability is so extreme that when Kai strikes him, the spear snaps in half, leaving Kai no choice but to fight empty-handed. To his credit, Kai refuses to back down, but this determination leads to him getting brutally kicked away. The impact knocks him out, leaving him gasping and unable to continue. Luckily for Kai, Vezin seems content with how the fight played out and doesn't press further. He reaches out a hand to help Kai back to his feet, and having taken a liking to him, he declares that starting tomorrow, he will personally take charge of Kai's training. Kai isn't exactly thrilled about the idea, but he knows he can't turn down an offer from the chief. Jose is impressed that Kai managed to hold his own so well against her father, but Alha doesn't share the same sentiment, still viewing Kai as nothing more than an ordinary commoner. Meanwhile, Jose is already caught up thinking about her next training together. Once Vezin heads off, Monzo and the rest of Kai's friends come by to check on him, and after making sure he's alright, they burst into laughter since he ended up training with Vezin. With both Jose and Vezin constantly pulling him in every direction, Kai hasn't had the chance to leave the village for quite some time, but tonight, he finally gets the chance to slip away. Kai makes his way back to the valley, feeling excited to return, but then he notices a house and immediately gets upset, thinking the Korers moved in even after he warned them the area was off limits. But when he goes to investigate, he finds out it was only Eru. Although Kai had forbidden the Korers from entering the valley, Eru had never actually left. On top of that, she had been getting ready for Kai's return, and even brings out a plate of food she prepared just for him. Kai was on the verge of telling her to leave, but then he catches sight bite of the food she prepared, and suddenly, he no longer has any objections to Aru staying in the valley. Aru inquires if he enjoys the meal she made, and Kai responds by saying it's delicious. However, beyond just the taste, this is the biggest portion he's ever had the chance to enjoy. He almost finds himself wishing he could remain here indefinitely, since the servings he gets back in the village are typically very small. The next day, Kai is surprised because when he heads to the buffet to collect his daily meal, he's handed a fairly generous portion. The woman explains that she's giving him extra because he's been putting in a lot of effort recently. Kai appreciates the additional food, but his friends grow envious and question why he's the only one receiving special treatment. In response, she points out that they've been slacking all day, so if they want bigger portions, they'll need to start working harder for it. Meanwhile, across the buffet, Elsa is busy serving other villagers, but she's so distracted staring at Kai that she ends up piling way too much food onto this guy's plate. Now, she has to try and talk him into giving the extra portion back. In the coming days, Kai persists with his nightly ritual of slipping out of the village to monitor the valley. While there, he chooses to assist Aru in constructing a house. However, completing it in a single day is impossible, so he begins by chopping a tree using his energy blade. The next morning, he returns to the village and spends the day training with Jose. Then that night, he goes back to the valley to continue building. He gets used to coming and going without anyone noticing him, and he really enjoys life in both villages. One day, Kai and his companions are assigned the task of relocating a massive boulder to clear room for new fields. Despite their collective efforts, they're unable to move it even slightly. Noticing their struggle, Vezin steps forward to lend a hand. For now, everyone clears a path for him, and Vezin grabs the boulder, moving it with all his might, even for someone with Vezin's immense strength. A boulder of this size is no easy task. Yet, after a few moments of effort, he finally pries the massive rock free from the earth and even manages to raise it above his head. With the obstacle removed, the land is now clear for farming, and this new stretch of fertile soil means the village of Lag will thrive like never before. Seeing this, Vezin can't help but feel satisfied. Watching Vezin in that state inspires Kai to strive to become a great guardian bearer like him. So that night, while he's in the valley, Kai begins practicing with his powers and tries to make a flower bloom. But regardless of how much energy he channels into it, the flower refuses to react. Although Kai is physically strong now, there's still so much he has to learn before he can truly consider himself a rightful guardian bearer. The next morning, Kai returns to the village, and normally no one wakes up this early in the morning. But today, Kai runs into Elsa in the flower fields. He asks her why she's up so early, and she explains that she just wants to admire the flowers while they are in bloom. Kai never really noticed the flowers much before, but even he has to acknowledge how lovely they look. Elsa mentions that these blossoms remind her of the ones from their childhood village, the place where they both grew up. Kai seems puzzled by her comment, so Elsa continues, explaining how, even as their village burned, they still made an effort to save the flowers. It takes Kai a moment, but he soon recalls that Elsa was also from his original village. Elsa is upset that Kai failed to recognize her, given she was by his side when their village was destroyed. Kai comments that he was very young at the time, so many of his memories remain unclear. Kai might not have noticed Elsa, but she has certainly been observing him, and she finds it remarkable that he managed to gain Vezin's notice. Yet, Kai explains to her that he still has much to improve, as he considers himself weak compared to Vezin. He has a great deal to learn if he hopes to grow stronger, since that's the only path to his survival. Elsa recalls Kai saying those exact words on the day their village was engulfed in flames, but Kai's memory is still a little hazy, so she begins to recount what took place. As all the villagers were trying to flee, a gorilla suddenly ambushed them, and since none of them had any combat skills, they were basically helpless and on the verge of being massacred. But without hesitation, Kai charged straight at the gorilla and grabbed hold of its leg. Naturally, Kai was far too weak to inflict any real damage on the gorilla, but his courage gave Vezin just enough time to show up and save them. While Kai felt relieved that Vezin had rescued everyone, he also couldn't help but feel frustrated by how little he was able to contribute, so he made a vow to do whatever it took to become stronger. Then again, that oath might not hold much weight, considering he had forgotten all about it. Elsa shares with him that it holds deep meaning for her, as on that day, even if it didn't seem so, Kai rescued all the villagers. In her view, he will forever remain a true hero. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, a fierce battle is raging between the gorillas and the orcs, with the orc general completely overpowering the fight. Even the gorilla guardian bearers were no match for him, and were instantly decapitated. With that, the orcs declared victory over the gorillas, claiming this territory as their own, and now, their sights are set on Kai's valley. However, at this moment, Kai remains completely oblivious to the danger that approaches. The valley remains unchanged, so Kai returns to the village, and the following morning, he's assigned to storehouse duty. As he's working, he spots a grain of wheat on the floor and starts thinking whether he could use it to make rice balls, since he's been eager to try them. At that moment, Elsa approaches him, having overheard Kai mention rice balls, and she asks if he can describe what they are. Kai isn't entirely sure how to explain it, but he believes they're supposed to be incredibly delicious, even though he's never had one himself. Shortly after, Manso enters and scolds Kai, telling him to stop talking to Elsa and get back to work since there are still plenty of bags left to move. Kai quickly apologizes and resumes carrying the bags, while Vezin urges everyone to speed up and stash the food sacks in the basement before the inspector arrives. Alha walks up to Vezin and questions whether hiding the food from the inspector is truly needed, but Vezin explains that with the village's food supplies running low, failing to conceal some of it would mean smaller rations for the villagers. Alha doesn't seem bothered. After all, a bit of hunger never killed anyone. But Vezin genuinely cares for his people and refuses to let anyone go hungry under his leadership. Kai and his friends don't know the full story, but they've heard that an inspector from the Central Plains is on his way, and they need to stash away some of their food before he arrives and takes everything. They've also heard that this inspector is a guardian bearer, even stronger than Vezin, but unlike Vezin, he doesn't use his power for anything honorable. A few hours pass. The inspector shows up, prompting the gate to be opened as Vezin steps forward to greet him. The inspector's first reaction is to grumble about how many demi-humans are around, explaining that he was attacked by a group of gorillas on his way here. He claims there were about 10 of them, but he was able to fend them off by himself, so he's fine. Jose finds that impressive. After all, it takes real strength to handle 10 gorillas solo, but when she finally meets him, she's far less impressed. Gandil is just a pipsqueak, and his very first act is to belittle Jose, calling her a frail woman. He doesn't stop there, he also mocks Alha, accusing him of being incompetent for failing to eliminate the demi-humans in the region. Neither of them dares to argue back. Moments later, another man steps through the village gate, prompting Vezin to ask if he's with Gandal's party, but that isn't the case. The stranger introduces himself as Nada, explaining that he was dispatched by the monastery of Maz. He merely took the same route as Gandal, which is why they showed up at the same time. Gandil proceeds to examine the village storehouse, and his expression darkens. There's barely any grain inside. As a tax collector, he takes immense satisfaction in squeezing every last bit from small villages. So he turns to Vezin and demands to know if this pitiful amount is truly all the grain the village has saved. Vezin insists that he would never even think of hiding any part of their harvest and assures Gandil that what he sees is all they have. He offers an excuse, claiming that the weather's been bad lately, which has ruined their recent crops. However, Gandil chooses to use the weather as a convenient excuse to remain in the village for a while, clearly because he's feeling suspicious. Vezin has no option but to agree to Gandil's request, even though it essentially means they'll be stuck footing the bill for all of Gandil's extravagant demands. Jose isn't happy about it, but Vezin reminds her that there's nothing they can do. Gandil is an official inspector, and opposing him is the same as defying the king. Later that day, Kai is passing through the village when he notices Nada kneeling by one of the graves, carefully tending to it. Kai thanks him for taking care of the burial sites, but Nada simply replies that it's his duty as a monk. He then mentions that he's heard the stories about Kai, how he gained incredible strength after consuming a massive amount of godstones. Nada reveals that the same thing happened to him during his training at the monastery, where he was required to eat large quantities of godstones, which ultimately made him far stronger. Kai shows interest and questions Nada about whether his strength matches that of the guardian bearers. Nada reveals his divine crest as evidence of his power. This leaves Kai even more astonished, as he hadn't realized Nada was a guardian bearer. However, Nada clarifies that this isn't true. While he does possess a divine crest, he never actually obtained divine protection. Kai is surprised, unaware that one could acquire a divine crest without a god's blessing. But Nada explains that through intense training and reaching a high enough level of strength, it's possible to awaken a divine crest naturally. As Kai and Nada continue their conversation, Gandalf is seated in the castle, presented with a feast, yet he remains unsatisfied. His server apologizes, explaining that this is the finest they can prepare given their limited supplies. However, Gandalf dismisses their concerns and insists on being given more, even if it means some villagers go hungry. Because of Gandalf's selfish demands, the portions for the villagers have been drastically reduced, leaving them frustrated. They long for the day he returns to the capital so they can resume their normal meals, but there's nothing they can do to make him leave. Meanwhile, inside Vezin's room, Nada is having a discussion with him about an important issue. A large group of orcs has been spotted, and this group is bigger than usual, which has Olha concerned that it could be the beginning of an invasion. Nada reassures him that there's no need to worry about a full-scale invasion, since the group isn't large enough to threaten the entire human kingdom, but it still poses a major danger. Because of that, Nada wants to go after the orcs. However, he admits he's unfamiliar with the region, so he asks if Vezin could provide some help. Vezin understands the situation and agrees to arrange for a few people to accompany Nada on his mission to track down the orcs. That night, Kai returns to the valley, bringing some unfortunate news for Arua. He has been selected to join the squad assisting Nada in hunting down the orcs that have been roaming the area, meaning he won't be able to come back to her until the mission is complete. While Aru understands, she can't help but fear that if Kai leaves, he might never make it back to the valley. Still, Kai reassures her, no matter what, he will return. After all, as the guardian bearer of this valley, protecting it is his responsibility. Kai then makes his way out of the valley to meet up with Porek. He tells him that he'll be tracking down a band of orcs that have appeared nearby, and Porek speculates they might be searching for the ones Kai took out a few days earlier. Kai agrees it's a possibility, but he isn't too concerned. He's ready to deal with whatever the orcs bring his way. The following morning, while Gandalf continues to lounge around, a squad is dispatched to pursue the orcs that Nada is searching for. Olha and Vezin observe the group as they head out, though Olha feels it wasn't the best decision to assign Jose to this mission. Under normal circumstances, Vezin would have chosen Olha, but he now has to deal with the guerrillas that allegedly attacked Gandalf on his journey here. On top of that, Kai is accompanying her, and since Vezin has faith in him, he's confident that Jose will be fine. At that moment, Elsa comes rushing out of the gate, eager to give something to Kai. She tried her hardest to recreate the rice balls Kai mentioned by using wheat, and she wants him to taste them. Kai expresses his gratitude for the kind gesture, and strangely, just looking at the rice balls makes him think of his mother, even though he's been an orphan his entire life in this world. Then, Manso calls out to Kai, urging him to get moving. So Kai thanks Elsa once more and tucks the wheat balls into his shirt to save for later. The group then heads out, and after traveling for a while, they come across a horrific scene. There are dozens of dead apes and orcs scattered all over the place, and Nada believes that the orcs they are chasing must have gotten in a fight with the gorillas. However, there are a lot more ape corpses than there are orcs, but it looks like the orcs won the battle. But Kai has no idea why the orcs would do something like this. Jose mentions to Kai that they might be after the same thing as Nada, since she overheard part of his conversation with Vezin and Olha the previous night. Though she didn't catch everything, just then, Nada approaches, and since both Kai and Jose are curious, he decides to explain. He reveals that he's here because of an ancient prophecy. The prophecy speaks of a mighty god destined to emerge in these lands, and Nada's mission is to locate this god and its gravestone before anyone else can seize it. Legend states that whichever race secures the god will gain unimaginable power, so he absolutely cannot let the demi-humans get to it first. Kai questions what sort of god they're dealing with, prompting Nada to explain it's an untamed spirit, bound by no one's will. Its power is beyond measure, and it doesn't distinguish between good or evil. As Nada speaks, Kai reflects on recent events in the valley, slowly realizing the god Nada seeks might actually be him, but he can't can't tell them about it. The group keeps moving forward, and after some time, they stumble upon a village that has been completely destroyed. Kai suspects the orcs may be responsible for the devastation, and it doesn't take long before he's convinced it was indeed their doing. Jose quickly dashes ahead, determined to assist any villagers who were attacked. Nada cautions her that it might be dangerous down there, but she insists she can't just stand by while people are in need. Once they arrive at the village, they discover that a lot of the homes have been destroyed, and there are a few dead Uzels on the floor over there. The Uzels are a quiet and peaceful species, so they aren't hostile towards humans, but whatever did this definitely was. Kai spots an orc axe on one of the fences, so everyone is immediately put on guard, and they tell Jose that they should get out of here before any more orcs show up. Still, Jose believes there's a chance some of the Uzels might have survived, so she refuses to leave until she's thoroughly searched the village for any remaining survivors. Nada agrees they should investigate the village as well, though his main interest lies in examining the local land god. With that in mind, Manso instructs Kai to accompany Nada while the others stay behind to protect Jose. As Jose and the others walk through the village, they discuss how strange this situation is. The village is completely empty, yet the damage to the buildings is minimal. Normally, orcs would cause much more destruction if they were going to attack a village like this. Just then, Jose notices some blood on the ground, and the trail leads over to a house, so she thinks there might be an injured Uzels inside. Meanwhile, Kai and Nada make their way into the village shrine to examine the gravestone of the local god. Since it's quite dark inside, Nada chooses to use his spiritual energy to produce some fire, but Kai quickly cautions him not to attract too much attention, as orcs could be nearby. Nada finds it odd how calm Kai remains, since most people would be shocked to witness someone conjure fire out of thin air. He starts to wonder if Kai has encountered a technique like this before, but Kai can't really admit that he too knows how to wield fire, so he simply says he heard about it in a story. Still, Nada doesn't seem entirely convinced. Back above ground, Jose approaches the house and calls out to whoever might be inside, assuring them she means no harm. But when she opens the door, all that greets her is the lifeless body of an orc. Meanwhile, Kai and Nada have successfully located the gravestone. Nada pulls out a small notebook and begins deciphering the inscriptions etched into its surface. As he works, Kai circles around to the back to ensure the area is clear, only to stumble upon a young Uzels girl collapsed on the ground. Kai and Nada carry the girl back up to the surface, where they discover a total of 3 orc corpses alongside her. Noticing such a small number, Nada concludes this couldn't have been the orc's primary force. Judging by the woman's clothes, it seems she was once the guardian bearer of this village. The others are taken aback by this revelation, since female guardian bearers like Jose are uncommon. Nada explains that this Uzel's guardian bearer fought entirely on her own. By nature, Uzels are physically frail. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't stand a chance against even one orc. Yet this woman managed to slay all 3 orcs, buying time for some of her people to flee, even though it ultimately cost her own life. And knowing that other female guardian bearers are capable of achieving such incredible feats gives Jose the hope that she, too, can become strong enough to fight and defend the village. Together, they hold a small funeral to honor the fallen Uzels, but it seems that the guardian bearer's godstone was taken, which likely means her land god's protection has already been passed on to someone else. Bringing up the land gods, Manso questions whether Nada discovered what he was seeking in the shrine below. However, the deity present wasn't the prophesied one. With only 2 possible routes branching from the orc-ape battleground, the presence of just 3 orcs along this path suggests that the majority of their forces must have taken the alternate path. Kai glances at the map and instantly recognizes that the route Nada mentioned heads directly toward his valley. Without hesitation, he offers to rush ahead and investigate. There's no way he can allow the orcs to breach his home. Nada finds his behavior strange, but he agrees to let go. With that, Kai dashes off at full speed. Back in the valley, Porek and the Korers have just received alarming news. A band of orcs is advancing straight toward their home. Realizing they're defenseless without Kai, Porek orders Ketchak to round up as many villagers as possible and take cover. Meanwhile, he prepares to confront the orcs alone. He knows the odds are hopeless, but as their guardian bearer, he refuses to stand by while his people are slaughtered. His only hope is to buy time, praying Kai arrives before it's too late. That night, Olha and his men move in on the guerrillas spotted near the village. To his shock, there's a whole camp of them out here, and it looks like they're getting ready to attack. His men propose regrouping with the rest of their squad and launch an attack later, but Olha refuses to delay any longer. His men attempt to hold him back, pointing out that their numbers are too few to take on all the guerrillas, but Olha pays no attention. It wouldn't be so bad if his concern was the guerrillas striking during their retreat, but Olha's real motivation for charging into battle is his desire to win Gandalf's favor. Luckily, none of the others support his reckless plan, so in the end, Olha concedes and agrees to fall back to the village, regroup, and then launch their assault on the guerrillas. Meanwhile, the other group has made camp near the ruined village, and Kai's friends are beginning to wonder whether he was able to locate the orc horde or not. They're stuck waiting until Kai comes back and informs them of the orc's location. But it's already been a while, and they're starting to get concerned about Kai's safety. Jose grows particularly anxious, and she begins questioning whether she should have joined Kai after all. The thought even crosses her mind to chase after him, hoping to reach him in time, but the others insist she can't. Their duty is to ensure Jose's safety above everything else, and Kai would never approve of her risking herself for no purpose. Nada approaches Jose and reassures her there's no need to be so concerned. Kai is an exceptionally skilled warrior, meaning he likely won't fall out there. At this point, all they can do is have faith in Kai's abilities. Still, after saying this, Nada announces to the group that he's making his way up to the hill's peak. One of the guards asks why he's heading up there, and Nada replies that he's going to pray. That's all he can do in this situation. But the truth is, he's actually going to use a secret technique that lets him monitor Kai's movements. Somehow, Nada can't shake the suspicion that Kai understands far more about the valley god than he's letting on. Nada sits down to meditate, and soon, two radiant eyeballs materialize above him. He then dispatches these floating eyes into the forest to track down Kai. Meanwhile, Kai himself is sprinting at full speed, desperate to reach the valley before time runs out. As he races forward, he spots countless orc footprints pressed into the dirt, every single one leading directly toward the valley. Suddenly, Kai catches the sound of rustling from a nearby bush. Then, just seconds later, a figure leaps out and lunges at him with a knife. Kai instantly pulls out his own blade, fully prepared to strike down his assailant, until he recognizes it's only Ketchak. Moments later, the rest of the Korers emerge, and Kai feels a wave of relief that it wasn't an orc ambush. But confusion quickly follows. Why are the Korers even here? Porrick clarifies that they detected orcs advancing toward the valley, so they came to scout their movements and, if necessary, slow them down. However, according to Kai, they didn't need to go through all of that. As the guardian bearer of the valley, protecting it is his duty. But Ketchak argues that he and the other Korers also have every right to defend the valley, since they've established their new village around it. They refuse to leave it behind. Kai is pleased to hear that the Korers will stand with him, but just at that moment, a loud noise erupts nearby. Upon investigating, Kai discovers that the orc are indeed heading their way, and to make matters worse, the orc leader notices him, meaning he has no choice but to fight. While Kai is out there putting his life on the line, Gandalf remains in the village, squandering as much of the villagers' food as possible. He slams a plate onto the ground in a show of disrespect, then announces that as an inspector, they must all treat him with the highest level of respect, or else he'll have no choice but to doubt their loyalty to the king. Elsa kneels down to pick up the pieces of the plate Gandalf shattered, but as she does, Gandalf takes a proper look at her and notices just how beautiful she is. Curious, he asks for her name. She is puzzled by Gandalf suddenly speaking to her, but she answers anyway, telling him that her name is Elsa. Gandalf then orders her to pour him a drink. She can see exactly where this is headed, and honestly, the expression on Gandalf's face makes her sick. But given his position, refusing a direct command from him isn't an option, so she's left unsure how to handle the situation. Luckily, Adelia intervenes, sliding a fresh plate of food onto Gandalf's table to divert his attention away from Elsa. She pours his drink herself, cutting off any chance for him to demand it from Elsa. Even Gandalf seems caught off guard by how smoothly he's been shut down. Later, Elsa thanks Adelia for stepping in, but Adelia brushes it off, insisting it was nothing. Abruptly, Olha and Basco return, and Olha is visibly furious that he missed the opportunity to battle the guerrillas, so he shouts for someone to summon his father, urging him to assemble a bigger squad to confront them. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Kai's situation unfolds. An orc charges after him, but as it swings its weapon, Kai whirls around and drives his blade straight through its chest. Unfortunately, while Kai was distracted, another orc attempts to ambush him from behind. Just before the attack lands, Kechak intercepts, burying his weapon in the orc's neck. At this point, they've eliminated a significant number of the orc forces, forcing the remaining soldiers to reconsider their assault. But then, their leader appears, moving with calm as he positions himself at the front. He then reveals his divine crest, locking eyes with Kai in a clear display of intimidation. Though Kai sees nothing particularly remarkable about it, Porek immediately identifies the crest as belonging to one of the Rigdaros. Confused, Kai admits he doesn't understand what Rigdaros means, prompting Porek to explain. Among Orkind, there exist 6 extraordinary warriors, each blessed by mighty land gods. These elite fighters are known as the Rigdaros, and their power far surpasses that of any ordinary guardian bearer. Kai shouts a warning for the others to keep their distance. He'll need to unleash his full strength to take down the orc leader. Nearby, Nada watches everything unfold. He already had his doubts, but now, after catching sight of Kai's divine crest, it's unmistakable proof. Kai is the one he's been searching for all along. The orc facing Kai is called a Durakan, and he's fluent in the human tongue. He mentions how unexpected it is that Kai's predecessor has fallen. There hadn't been any recent rumors about the Valley God, making him hard to find. But then, one of his warriors was defeated in this area, so he chose to follow the trail, and just as he expected, it brought him straight to the new Valley God. The Valley God speaks to Kai, commanding him to kill the orc, but Kai was already intending to do just that. Without hesitation, he rushes forward and attempts to stab a Durakan, only for the orc to block the attack and counter, forcing Kai to leap back to evade the strike. Kai tries to thrust his blade into a Durakan once more, but this time, the orc effortlessly knocks him aside and mocks him, calling him weak. Kai quickly figures out that a direct confrontation with a Durakan won't work, so he shifts tactics by diving between a Durakan's legs and attempting to stab him from behind. Although the angle is perfect, a Durakan's skin proves far too tough to penetrate, causing Kai's spear to break. Still, Kai isn't out of moves. Just as a Durakan launches an attack, Kai drops low and drives the broken spear tip straight into a Durakan's side with a swift kick. At last, this manages to hurt the orc, and the Korers are thrilled because Kai could really pull off a victory here. Yet, to everyone's shock, a Durakan's injury heals in an instant. The moment he stands back up, he slams Kai down without hesitation. Kechak wonders if every guardian bearer can do something like that, but Porek explains that what a Durakan just did is far from ordinary. In fact, he's beginning to fear that a Durakan might be immortal. A Durakan raises Kai into the air as the other orcs erupt in cheers, mocking him as a pitiful imitation of a god. Kai tries to break free, but with a Durakan's hand wrapped tightly around his throat. A Durakan tells him that he's going to take great pleasure in destroying everything Kai holds dear. Once he's finished with Kai, he plans to storm the valley and slatter everyone in it, but Kai won't let things end that way. Summoning every ounce of strength he has left, he grabs hold of a Durakan's arm and unleashes a burst of fire. The pain forces a Durakan to hurl Kai to the ground. Kai quickly gets back on his feet, ready to keep fighting, and it's clear the flames are having a solid effect on a Durakan, so Kai intensifies the attack, launching an even greater wave of fire at him. But this time, the flames don't touch a Durakan. He charges straight through the fire and kicks Kai back with brutal force. The others are stunned. How could he have walked through that inferno unharmed? A Durakan smiles and reveals that his god spirit shields him at all times. His divine power lets him heal from or outright negate any attack he comprehends, and now that he's seen Kai's fire trick, it's useless against him. Kai is nearly out of both options and weapons, so he draws his knife and braces himself in a defensive stance. The problem is, he has no clue what move to make next. Physical strikes are completely ineffective, and magic isn't doing much against a Durakan anymore. So all Kai can do now is hope for a miracle. He attempts to stab a Durakan in the side, but the blade breaks the moment it makes contact, leaving Kai with nothing left to try. A Durakan then strikes him down, sending Kai crashing to the ground, and it's starting to seem like he's lost the will to keep fighting. The Korers are deeply concerned, realizing that a Durakan's blessing is far too powerful powerful for Kai to counter. Meanwhile, Nada is worried that if Kai falls here, the power of the Valley God will end up in the hands of the demi-humans. Adurikan gazes down at Kai, calling him a disgrace. Kai's mind races, desperately searching for a solution, knowing that if things continue this way, the valley and everyone inside it will be wiped out. Then, in that moment, Kai notices the rice balls Elsa prepared for him. The sight of those rice balls sparks a memory of all the extraordinary knowledge he holds. He suddenly remembers that he has one more trick up his sleeve, and it's all thanks to Elsa's gift. Adurakan stands over Kai and mockingly asks if he is ready to accept his fate, but Kai is simply planning out his attack. The power of Adurakan's god allows him to nullify the damage of any attack that he understands, but that only applies to things that people know about in this world. Kai isn't entirely sure about all these atoms and molecules flashing through his mind, but one thing is clear: neither Adurakan nor his so-called god has ever encountered them before. That means there's no way Adurakan could counter an attack from Kai's energy blade. Just as Adurakan raises his axe ready to smash Kai's skull, Kai dashes straight at him. Before Adurakan can even register what's going on, Kai slashes through the space between Adurakan's atoms with his energy blade, cutting his arm clean off. Adurakan is stunned, unable to comprehend what just happened, and the Korers are equally confused. They were certain that Adurakan's blessing made him invulnerable, but it's obvious he just lost an arm, meaning Kai must have taken a completely different approach. Adurakan can't accept that he's being defeated, so he lunges at Kai once more, but that turns out to be a terrible mistake. Kai cuts him across the chest, and within moments, Adurakan collapses to the ground, taking his final breath. Nada witnessed everything, completely stunned by what Kai just did. Not only does he wield fire magic, but he also used a type of magic Nada has never encountered before. Now, Nada knows he has to be careful. Back in the destroyed village, Manso stands watch beside Jose when, without warning, she crumples to the ground. Manso tries to figure out what's happening, until he and the rest notice the deep, ugly wound on her leg. The injury looks serious. Meanwhile, in the forest, Kai has just claimed Adurakan's godstone, and the remaining orcs can only watch, their faces filled with complete disappointment. Yet, they understand they're no match for Kai, so they stay back, keeping their distance. Kai consumes Adurakan's godstone, and since Adurakan's god was immensely powerful, the energy Kai gains from the stone is extraordinary. His power starts surging outward, so intense that it sends all the orcs fleeing in fear, and it's a good thing they ran off, because a moment later, he collapses to the ground, knocked unconscious by the overwhelming surge of new energy, and Porek has no idea what's going on. After some time, Kai regains consciousness, but he can't recall much of what took place. Curious, he turns to the Korers for answers, yet they're just as puzzled as he is, since everything went blurry after a sudden gust of wind blew through the area right when Kai consumed Adurakan's godstone. Porek suspects the cause may lie in the overwhelming power of Adurakan's land god. He thinks that when Kai absorbed Adurakan's strength, it might have provoked the deity. That strong gust of wind was probably the land god's furious scream, but Kai never imagined that a god's power could trigger something so intense. Now, he finds himself unsure of how to handle the immense strength he's acquired. For the time being, he makes his way down to the stream to rinse the blood from his clothes. After finishing that, he turns to Porek and asks if he noticed anything unusual during the battle. Kai had been too focused to catch all the details, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been observing him. Porek sensed it as well, though he chose to disregard it since there didn't seem to be any hostility. Still, the fact that someone had their eyes on Kai remains unsettling. Kai is ready to return to the others now, so he says his goodbyes. But before setting off, he pauses for a quick lunch. He pulls out the rice balls Elsa prepared for him, and it strikes him that he'll have to find a way to thank her once he's back. Without these, he might not have made it. They might have saved his life. Kai finally returns to the group, and the moment Manso sees him, he alerts Kai that something's wrong with Jose. Without hesitation, Kai hurries over to her and spots the strange strange mark on her leg, though he has no idea what could have left it. Just then, Nada arrives and mentions that he's seen this mark before, but instead of explaining right away, he first questions Kai about what happened with the orcs he was pursuing. Kai attempts to dismiss Nada's question, insisting they should concentrate on helping Jose first, but Nada presses for an answer, refusing to let it go. Kai lies, claiming he tracked down the orcs only to discover someone else had already killed them. Nada clearly sees through his lie, but exposing Kai out here wouldn't benefit him. Instead, he suggests that if the orcs are truly dealt with, they should focus on getting Jose back to the village for proper treatment. They set off without delay. As they're transporting Jose, Nada notices something suspicious. Kai's shirt is stained with blood. He points this out, remarking how strange it is since Kai insisted he didn't fight the orcs. Kai quickly fabricates an explanation, claiming he must have brushed against one of the dead orcs by accident. The group finally makes it back to the village, but upon arriving, they realize it was assaulted during their absence. As Kai steps through the gates, he spots the troop leader Basco holding one of the wounded men in his arms. Kai approaches him to find out what exactly took place. Basco tells him that the village came under attack from an overwhelming number of guerrillas, but thanks to Vezin's intervention, they managed to push them back. Even so, as is clearly visible, the village suffered heavy damage from the assault. Kai dashes to the refuge area, where everyone who lost their homes has gathered, and calls out for Elsa, praying she survived the attack. To his relief, Elsa's voice echoes from down the hall. She's still alive, and Kai is overjoyed to see her safe and sound. Meanwhile, the group takes Jose to Vezin, who is stunned to see that even Jose has been afflicted. He explains that Alha is showing the same symptoms and admits he understands the cause behind it. At the same time, a scouting party was dispatched to gather information on the guerrillas. To their terror, they find that the guerrillas have summoned reinforcements and are getting ready to launch another assault. Meanwhile, in the village, Kai assists Elsa in tending to the injured villagers, still struggling to accept how severely the village was destroyed. When the attack first began, Elsa had fled here with her mother and younger sister. She had been terrified, but just remembering Kai's face gave her a sense of safety. The moment Elsa says this, Grandma realizes she and Kai are about to share a special moment, so she quietly slips away. Kai turns to Elsa and begins to express his gratitude for the rice balls she prepared for him. However, before he can finish speaking, Manso suddenly appears and informs him that Vezin needs to see him right away. Kai makes his way to Vezin's office to deliver his mission report. Vezin expresses relief that the orcs have been neutralized as a threat, though he reminds Kai that the guerrilla problem still remains. Kai inquires about Jose and Alha's condition. Vezin explains that the guerrillas have cursed the land gods bound to Jose and Alha. It was a calculated move to eliminate the village's most powerful defenders. He adds that according to their earlier reconnaissance, the guerrillas appear to be mobilizing for another assault soon. Nada explains to Vezin that once the curse is removed, they'll regain their ability to fight. Because of this, he requests Kai to join him in breaking the curse. The reason he specifically chooses Kai is his strong belief in Kai's power. Vezin, too, has confidence in Kai, so he gives him his blessings and informs him that his journey will take him to Elg, to Alha's god, and then to Edda, to Jose's god. The fate of Lag village depends entirely on the success of this mission, but Vezin is putting his trust in Kai, and for Jose's sake, Kai vows to give it everything he's got. He and Nada then step out of Vezin's office, but as they make their way down the stairs, they hear Gandalf shouting. Even in the middle of this crisis, Kai can't help but wish Gandalf would actually contribute, especially since he's a guardian bearer, but considering how useless Gandalf tends to be, Nada doubts he'll be any help at all. In any case, Nada has a few things to get ready for the journey, so he tells Kai to meet him at the north gate once he's prepared. Meanwhile, Kai pays Elsa a visit and at last expresses his gratitude for the rice balls she prepared. Elsa is happy that the meal supported Kai during his mission, but he informs her he must set off on another journey today. Still, he reassures her that he'll return as quickly as he can, and when he does, he vows to take Elsa to a truly special place. Elsa takes Kai's hands and tells him she'll eagerly await his return. Yet, Yet, as Kai walks away, she can't help but already feel his absence. Kai finally reunites with Nada at the North Gate, where Nada appears to have been given a bag by Vezin to aid in breaking the curse. Meanwhile, Jose and Olha continue to suffer greatly from the curse's effects. After a few hours, Kai and Nada have just reached the village of Elg, where the land god of Olha is located. If the gorillas deliberately went through the trouble of cursing the gravestone in this place, they must be keeping watch to prevent anyone from lifting the curse. Nada announces that he'll scout ahead and immediately activates his surveillance technique. Kai realizes it's the same presence he detected during his fight with the Durekan. Nada explains that this power is known as 100 Eyes, a secret art he mastered at the monastery, granting him the ability to observe anything, no matter the distance. After scanning the area, Nada reports that just 5 gorillas are stationed at the gravestone, meaning the 2 of them should have no trouble dealing with them. The moment they reach the gravestone, Kai leaps into action, slashing one gorilla's throat before driving his blade into 2 more. He then moves to support Nada, only to find his companion more than capable of holding his own in battle. Kai is surprised by Nada's impressive skill, but in the heat of combat, he doesn't notice that his divine crest has been exposed. However, Nada had already suspected its existence, and seeing it, he drops to one knee. He pleads with Kai to wield the power of the savage god for the sake of the unified kingdom of men. Kai tells Nada there is no need for him to bow his head, but Kai really doesn't want to talk about this right now, so he says they should take care of the curse on Olha's land god. Nada agrees to drop the topic for now, so he begins cleaning up the gravestone while Kai stands guard. As Nada cleans up, he elaborates to Kai on why the unified kingdom desperately requires a new, mighty god. It isn't merely about strengthening the realm. The human kingdom is actually in steady decline year after year, and the root of this decay lies with figures like Gandalf. The kingdom's most formidable guardian bearers have grown corrupted by their own authority and the comforts it affords them. In their complacency, they've neglected their sacred responsibilities, and this negligence has gravely weakened the gods who uphold the king's reign. Without intervention, Nada warns, this downward spiral will only worsen. Nada explains that if the kingdom were still as strong as it once was, then reinforcements could have been deployed to assist during disasters like this. But with things as they are now, the number of tragedies will continue to rise year after year, because their current roster of gods can't support the king anymore. That's why Nada has been looking for a new god to strengthen the kingdom, even if it means tearing down the current hierarchy. Nada starts performing the curse-breaking ritual, prompting Kai to ask about the liquid he's pouring over the gravestone. Nada clarifies that the deity of Elg village serves the lag's god, meaning Vezin's blood, as the guardian bearer, can neutralize the curse. Once the blood fully absorbs into the stone, Nada announces the ritual's success. Now, he says, they must hurry to Ida village to repeat the process and free Jose from his affliction. As the journey continues, Nada launches into another speech about the shifting state of the world. He highlights how the gorillas, in their desperation, were even ready to undermine the land gods and throw the land into chaos just to secure victory. Kai questions what Nada means by desperate. Nada then clarifies, based on his research, that the gorilla nation is confronting a massive threat, one so severe it might drive them from their homeland. That's why they're invading human territory, to seek a new place to settle. It's the same with the orcs that Kai killed yesterday because they were looking for a new god in order to face the being that is threatening them in the north. With all the changes happening, Nada is worried that the kingdom of humans might be destroyed as a result, so he asks Kai to lend the power of his god to the kingdom of humans and save millions of lives. Kai finds Nada's story quite convincing. However, out of nowhere, the valley god starts urging him to kill Nada, leaving Kai uncertain about whether he can truly trust him. He asks Nada for a bit of time to think things over, and while Nada agrees to wait, he makes it clear that he expects an answer once they've lifted the curse on Hosea's land god. Meanwhile, back in the village, the mark on Olha's body has begun receding thanks to the efforts of Kai and Nada, and if Olha regains enough strength to join the fight, then the villagers of Lag have a good chance of surviving. Kai and Nada finally reach the gravestone in Edda after defeating the gorillas protecting it. Nada starts working to break the curse. Meanwhile, Kai steps outside for a walk, reflecting on the power he now holds. He's been unsure about how to use it. If it's for a noble purpose, like saving lives, perhaps that's the right path. Still, he can't figure out why the Valley God was so furious with Nada. At that moment, Nada steps outside and questions whether Kai has reached a decision yet, but Kai remains uncertain. Nada attempts to convince him, explaining that by joining the kingdom's mausoleum, he would earn the God King's favor, and with it, a tremendous boost in power, enough that rescuing the people of Lag would be effortless, especially those Kai holds dear, like Elsa. That makes sense. But Kai also feels responsible for people beyond the village, including the Korers, who have sworn their loyalty to him. Yet Nada insists that he must leave the Korers behind. Kai demands an explanation. Nada then clarifies, the kingdom's mausoleum refuses to accept lowly demi-humans, regardless of their peaceful nature. Humans stand above all, and mingling with other species is simply unthinkable. Kai insists that the Korers are anything but lowly, but Nada brushes off his words. Instead, he urges Kai to dedicate his power solely to humanity, no one else. But if those are the kingdom's conditions, Kai declares he has no choice but to decline. As a guardian bearer, his duty is to defend his land god and all who dwell within its domain. Abandoning the Korers is simply not an option. Nada questions whether anything might sway Kai's decision, but Kai remains unwavering in his response. To Nada's surprise, he simply smiles and states that if Kai won't accept the terms, he'll have to let go of recruiting him. For now, he even assures Kai that he'll come up with an excuse to keep his superiors from pursuing him further. Kai genuinely thinks he's being honest, but just moments later, Nada betrays him, stabbing him in the back, and now Kai is bleeding a lot.